morning. Kade Wells here. Today I want to talk about Dungeon Master training as quickly as possible. Last night I had the Dungeon Masters only from my groups stay after school to run through the Lost Mines of Phandelver. I used this photocopy so that we can write out it and stuff like that. I was going to cut this video and show you me actually training the kids. It would end up being very, very long with lots of editing. And I figured there's plenty of places for people to see gameplay if that's what they want to do. It is kind of nice to see like how I go through it with the kids, but I think I can explain it to you pretty fluidly here. So the first step is to make sure that they all have an adventure, whether you're using it from a screen or a PDF or whatever it is. They have to have it in front of them, and then you are DMing them as players, but they have the adventure in front of them. That should make perfect sense. So as you get started, you don't have to worry about like the secretive element of the adventure. They need to know how to run the adventure. So you are really just going through step by step. And I started on page 6 with part 1, Goblin Arrows. And I just simply explained to them like how the text works, right? Like the white boxes are for read alouds to players. The other stuff is secret information for Dungeon Masters, how to look at sidebars and things like that, to make sure that they look at bullet points. And we literally go through these one at a time. Explain to you, these DMs that have either been volunteered or voluntold to do this, that it's not going to be perfect. It's a learning curve. But if they don't breeze through a little bit before they run an adventure, it's going to be very difficult for them to do it well. And so it's going to be clunky at first because you're literally explaining everything that you're having them do, and then you metacognate that and say, okay, so I just went around the table and said, what do you want to do? 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 Even if it's not combat, it's still role-playing. And then I asked them, what did I just do? Well, you came to each one of us. And I said, what I'm actually doing is I'm validating your existence as a player by making sure that I get to all of you. And then you explain things like you're going to have to pull things out of people sometimes, which is why the practice for them is so necessary with you in DM training, is because as an experienced DM, I can say, roll a perception check, or like, you got a weird feeling, and you can kind of help them bring the story to life. And so every time I do something as a DM with them as players, I then stop and explain, this is why I've done that. This is what you'll do with your players. Do you have any questions? And so you really just run it like a class, but D&D is your subject. And then you got to learn how to be dungeon masters, which is incredibly difficult. And so instead of showing you an hour, 90 minutes long of us, playing D&D and me stopping and starting and things like that, I just thought I'd try to explain it. Hopefully it helps a little bit, but you got to train DMs. You can't just let them go. So we do 2 weeks of that Wednesday after school for 90 minutes, where they literally run through the adventure that with me that they will run through with their peers. Now, of course, the adventure, anybody who knows this adventure, it's very, very good. This is the original starter kit, and they got a new one now that I have to go through so that I can use it in instruction, because you can't just get something brand new and then, just do it. You got to look through it and make sure you got all the stuff. So there is a split in the adventure, and for training, you'll have to decide yourself, for instance, whether it would be more significant for them to go to Cragmar Hideout, or if it would be more beneficial for you to teach them how to go to town. I'm going to suggest teaching them how to go to town is more important, because they already got goblin arrows from the beginning. That's a little encounter that shows them how combat works. You get to show them the goblin stat block, because goblins, although kind of weak creatures, are really, really interesting because they get the rogue's ability to hide and dash, I think, as a bonus action. So the kids get to start to see those mechanics, and every time I do something with the goblin, I'm explaining, here's where it is in the block. Here's where I'm looking. It's +4 to attack. Use the average damage to speed things up. I also explained challenge rating a little bit. Like, you don't want to go into this a whole bunch with them, but they have to understand that whatever they're facing, whatever their characters are going up against, it has to be fair. And so that can be hard for kids because they don't know what they're looking at. So you show them the CR, like, this is really low. I also explained that, the quests that are written are adjusted for a certain amount of characters. And so if an encounter, for instance, was really easy, all they have to do is add a couple of monsters that came from the deeper bushes, right? And I explained doing them all at once, like putting all the monsters on the board at one time, can be very difficult for a Dungeon Master, and it's unnecessary. Waves is actually much more effective, because then a kid only has to run 2 to 3, 4, maybe monsters at a time. And then if people are just slaying them like crazy, one round 4 of the goblins are dead, bring a couple more. Not going to hurt anything. But to run it with just 6 in the beginning, you could really overbalance, your monster side of things and accidentally kill your players. So we talked about that a little bit. And again, this is like while running through the adventure. So, we didn't get very far. We got through the goblin arrows encounter, and that's it. So they got a little bit of combat. They understood advantage and disadvantage given the context. And so you pretty much have to have an experienced player / dungeon master in order to train dungeon masters. There's really no way around it. That is the unfortunate reality. And then, of course, as a dungeon master running for a team of dungeon master players who are learning, you can only do 5 or 6, maybe 7 soaking wet to train them. So in order to get training for like really large groups, you just got to start to get on the horn and maybe get every friend you ever had that ever played the game and get them to come in and help train after school. A lot of schools will allow, people to come into the building that are registered visitors or whatever to do something like that. So I would just start community outreach. If I had like poor lady in Los Angeles, it's exciting. She's got 90 kids in D&D club. And needs dungeon masters, you're going to be looking for games of 5 to 6 people. So, that's like something in the order of, 14 to 15 dungeon masters. It's hard. But I have full faith in that. Back to Van Dillen. Going to town role-playing the people in town will help your dungeon masters infinitely because you want that social interaction component of the game. You don't want it all to boil down into combat. Then you get, today you are fighting this, and then they start, and it's like no. That's one of my peeves. Today you're fighting this. Okay, so what game are we playing? This is dumb. You need that social interaction. You need that element of exploration. That's what makes the game the game. If it wasn't for those 2 other things, the combat would be arbitrary. I wouldn't play it. If it was just sitting down to fight on a battle map, I wouldn't play the game. They used to do that back in 4th edition with the minis and created like battle maps that all you did was sit down and you fought monsters, against other monsters, kind of like Magic the Gathering or something, but it was with miniatures. I didn't like that either. I wanted to play D&D. I need all 3 components. I need that social interaction. I need the exploration. I need the combat. I need it all to go together in a way. That's what makes the game fun for me, is the emulation of reality in a fantasy world. So you getting to run them into Phandelver after Goblin Arrows, I'm going to suggest have them skip the cave because the cave adventure is also tied to town. So when you get to town there and your like second session is how I do it, however you do it is however you do it, but we get to town second session and you get to show them where all the quests come from, right? Like, okay, look at this page. Look at these. Well, I guess I can actually do it. I'm just trying to be quick about it. So once they get to Phandalin, Part 2, Phandalin, show them, the major NPCs. I actually have a slideshow made to show more about these NPCs a little bit, made like locations, just so that the DMs have it on a slide. The side characters are all in one place. That's very, very helpful, is to take the information from your adventure and make something like a slideshow that coordinates with it so that all of the things for one NPC show up in one set of the slide. Now in the adventure, they'll be plastered all over the place. For instance, Sildar Hallwinter comes into play in a couple different places, but I took all the information for Sildar and I put it in one chunk of the slideshow so that like this is all Sildar. And you try to put coordinate page numbers where the information's coming from in that slideshow so that a kid can like kind of just breeze through their slideshow and use it like, oh, that's all the stuff for Sildar Hallwinter. It's been assistive in the past to just make sure the information is really accessible. But then, you've got the Stonehill Inn and Barthen's Provisions and Lion Shield Coster, and you want to show them a little bit of how to role play each of these people and how each of these people is tied to a quest. This is going to really be the awakening factor for them. And then this piece for the DM training is not going to be so bogged down with combat. That's the 2 sessions they're really going to get. And they're going to be very nervous. They always are, of course, the first time, you do it. A lot of us are nervous the first time we DM, even if it's friends and stuff. So, you expect them to be a little rigid and a little stiff. So I guess to didact here, to go back and re-express how to do it, you just have to do it. But you want the adventure in front of them. You want to point out all the things that you're doing as a DM while you help them learn the mechanics of the game. Because keeping in mind, they're first-time players that you're forcing into this DM role. And they're going to need a lot from you. So you show them exactly how you would run the adventure and point to all the things that, should be considered. And so it's literally just sort of speaking out loud as your dungeon master role. They look at it in their own adventures and take note. And keeping in mind then, they will be running this exact same adventure with their peers. So that I would suggest every single time. Your new players, don't let them sandbox. That should be obvious, but if it's not, don't let them sandbox. They don't know what they're doing, and if nobody knows what a sandbox is, that means don't say, you walk into town, what do you want to do? At willy-nilly at large. Like, you got to give them a focus, plus you're at school, so there should be text to focus upon, right? Like, don't just let them do whatever they want. It's a bad idea. Now, if you have older experienced players, like I have a class that's played before, I don't mind having the DMs make a campaign. That should be the evolution of their gameplay, right? They should be able to make their own world or whatever, their own quest. And both of my DMs in English 1 have done that, and I'll be running a group as well because it's kind of a bigger class, so that'll be fun. I get to run a game. I'm going to do... pretty sure I'm going to do Zombie Apocalypse. I'm going to use Phandalin. I'm going to use the Essentials Kit. I'm going to do some of those quests. I might add a couple more, right, because it's fun. And then as they come back to town, at one point, some guy's going to be like, oh, my grandma just attacked me. And players will be like, well, that's kind of weird. And the guy's going to say, yeah, it's really weird because she's been dead for 2 months, and she came into the house and tried to eat me. And then little by little, I think I'll introduce this sort of plague. And it's kind of cliche and stuff, but it becomes a survival game, and then you get to meet the people in Phandalin. Then, of course, if they go away on a quest at one point and then come back, then maybe the whole town is zombies, and there's only a couple people boarded up into one house that are afraid for their lives, right? Becomes a neat quest, and then we'll see where that goes. I'm just kind of playing with it. I've piddled with it before. Now I'm going to flesh it out a little bit more. Walking Dead campaign, why not, right? It's fun. So that's what my English 1 kids... So in summary, use a quest, give them the quest, you all have it in front of you, go through it piece at a time, show them how all the different pieces of text work. They're not going to be perfect, of course, it's going to take time, but by the second or third time they play with their peers, you're going to see they pretty much got it. And then we run D&D Club on Wednesdays after school, after DM training is over, then it'll turn into regular club. And a lot of those players that I have will want to be in DM Club to experience other, gameplay with other peers that I don't have for class, for instance. And so then you have players beginning to start to really get it. And so when you got a DM that's been trained, right, for a couple of sessions, and then you've got kids who are starting to understand it, all of a sudden you're going to see the community of learning come together, and scores go up. All right, so as greatly unhelpful as this probably was, you got to train your DMs. The only way to do it is to play with them. Make it very obvious what you're doing. Take away the element of surprise. Make sure they understand all the things that you're doing when they're playing the game. They're not going to remember it all, but at least having that experience is a little burned in. Then by session 2, you should have a pretty good idea. I'll probably get them to Phandalin, show them where quests come from, kind of quickly show them like how to role play each of these people, and let them know you can make up your own personality however you like. And then I may have them go to Cragmar Cave and do that very quickly, just to show them how town connects to quests or whatever. It doesn't have to be so specific, but the point is they have to understand how the text works, and they have to understand how their action ability comes from that text, and then what to do when you have players. How does the text go from the text to the game is really the training element. And be very, very patient and very helpful and very kind, and your kids will learn how to play this game, and they will get brighter. Peace.